My sister kicked my pregnant belly at Mom's birthday party. This is what you get for thinking you're better than family. She screamed. I couldn't breathe, my baby went silent. Then my federal judge husband stepped forward. You just committed a felony in. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. That morning was a Saturday in late May. The Denver sun was already spilling through our bedroom window, painting golden stripes across the floor. I remember it so clearly. I was 6 months pregnant, and I felt good. Truly good. Strong. I was carrying our baby girl, and she was an active little thing, always pressing her tiny feet against my ribs like she was eager to join the world. I could hear my husband, Preston, already in the kitchen. The rich smell of brewing coffee, his was always extra strong, drifted up the stairs, mixed with the faint sound of him humming something classical. It was our routine. Our peaceful, happy routine. I stretched, a slow, careful movement these days, and placed a hand on my growing belly. Good morning, little one, I whispered. She gave a little flutter in response, as if to say good morning back. Preston and I, we had a good life. A life we had built together, one that felt safe and steady. He was a federal judge, the youngest ever appointed to the Byron White Courthouse downtown. I'd met him 8 years ago when I was working as a court reporter during his confirmation hearing. I remember being so struck by him, not just by his intelligence, but by the kindness in his dark eyes, the way they crinkled at the corners when he smiled. I never imagined then that I'd marry him, or that his steady presence would become the anchor of my entire world. I finally managed to get out of bed and pulled on a flowing emerald green dress, one that complemented my belly, and slipped into a pair of comfortable flats. Today was my mom's big 60th birthday party. And despite the complicated feelings I had about big family gatherings, I wanted to look nice for her. Just then, Preston appeared in the doorway. He was holding 2 mugs, steam curling from them like little prayers. You look radiant, he said, that familiar smile reaching his eyes. He set my mug of decaf tea on the nightstand. Thank you, I said, my voice a little tight. I took the mug gratefully. I'm nervous about today. He didn't have to ask why. He sat on the edge of our bed, his expression growing serious. Brenta's been texting you again, hasn't she? I just nodded, pulling up the messages on my phone. The latest one had arrived at 6 a.m. It was the same old story. Another rant about how I thought I was better than everyone now that I'd married a judge. How I'd abandoned my roots. Preston read them over my shoulder, and I felt his jaw tighten. Audrey, this isn't normal sibling rivalry, he said, his voice low and firm. Some of these messages are genuinely concerning. He was right, of course. My little sister, Brenda, had always been volatile. Growing up, she was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes, while I was the quiet, steady one. But lately, her anger seemed more focused, more venomous. It had intensified ever since Preston and I announced the pregnancy. She accused me of thinking I was too good for the family now that we lived in Cherry Creek instead of our old neighborhood in Lakewood. The irony was, Brenda lived in a custom-built house her husband Gary's family had helped them get, drove a brand new SUV, and took lavish vacations twice a year. But somehow, in her eyes, I was the one who had gotten too big for her britches. She's just jealous, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, they felt weak, like a flimsy excuse I'd been using for years. You know how she gets around family events. Preston stood up and adjusted his tie. It was a subtle gesture, but I knew what it meant. He was shifting into his professional mindset, the calm, analytical judge taking over. Promise me something, he said. If she starts anything today, anything at all, we leave. Immediately. But it's Mom's birthday, Preston. I can't just bail on her. Your mother will understand, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. Our baby's safety comes first. I mean it, Audrey. We leave at the first sign of trouble. I agreed, though a part of me, a foolish, hopeful part, prayed it wouldn't come to that. Despite everything, Brenda was still my sister. We'd shared a room growing up, built forts in the backyard. There had to be some piece of that bond left, right? Some remnant of the sister who used to braid my hair before school pictures. I had to believe there was. The drive to my parents' house in Lakewood took about 30 minutes. With each mile, it felt like we were traveling back in time, through familiar neighborhoods where the houses got a little smaller, the lawns a little less manicured. It was the world I grew up in, a world Brenda claimed I had abandoned. When we pulled into my parents' driveway, the party was already in full swing. Cars lined both sides of the street, and the sound of laughter and mariachi music drifted from the backyard. My mom, Lorraine, had gone all out. She'd rented white tents and transformed their modest yard into something magical. "Ready?" Preston asked, squeezing my hand as we got out of the car. "As I'll ever be," I sighed, trying to force a smile. We walked through the side gate into a scene of wonderful, controlled chaos. There had to be at least 50 people milling around. Tables were laden with tamales, pozole, and a massive tres leches cake. The smell of grilled meat mixed with the roses from my mom's garden, a scent that immediately transported me back to childhood summers. My mom spotted us first. Lorraine Rodriguez, even at 60, was a force of nature. Her silver hair was swept into an elegant updo, and she wore a dress the color of deep wine. She rushed over, her face glowing with that particular joy that comes from being surrounded by everyone you love. "Mija! You look beautiful," she exclaimed, wrapping me in a careful hug that accommodated my belly. "And Preston, so handsome, as always." Preston accepted her embrace with genuine warmth. That was one of the things I loved most about him. Despite his formal profession and prestigious salary, he'd never shown even a hint of condescension toward my working-class family. If anything, he always seemed more relaxed here than he did at stuffy judicial conferences. "Happy birthday, Lorraine," he said, producing a small, wrapped gift from his jacket pocket. 60 looks wonderful on you." She beamed and guided us toward the main family table where my dad, Walter, was holding court with his old construction crew buddies. My dad had aged more visibly than my mom. His hands were permanently stained with calluses and concrete dust, a testament to a life of hard work. He stood when he saw us, his weathered face breaking into a huge, genuine smile. "There's my successful daughter," he boomed, pulling me into a hug that smelled of Old Spice and sawdust. "And how's my granddaughter doing in there?" "Kicking like she wants to be a soccer player," I laughed, placing his hand on my belly just as the baby obliged with a strong little thump. Dad's eyes widened with wonder. It was a pure, beautiful moment. And that's when I saw her. Brenda was standing across the yard, near the makeshift bar. She already had a drink in her hand, her expression unreadable from this distance. Even from 50 feet away, I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself like a coiled spring. Her husband, Gary, stood beside her, his hand touching her arm in a gesture I recognized all too well, the calming motion, the attempt to de-escalate before anything even started. He looked tired. He always looked tired. Gary caught my eye and gave a small, strained wave. I waved back, my stomach twisting into a knot. For the first hour, everything was surprisingly peaceful. My mom, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension, proudly led us around, introducing Preston to relatives who regarded him with a mixture of awe and curiosity. We found ourselves at a table with my cousin Elena, discussing her kids' plans for their college fund and just enjoying the food and the music. For a moment, I actually started to relax. I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, today would be different. That was my mistake. Hope is a dangerous thing when it comes to people like my sister. The illusion of peace shattered the moment Brenda approached our table. She moved with a kind of predatory grace, her eyes fixed on us. Well, she said, her voice dripping with a familiar, sharp-edged sarcasm I remembered from 1,000 childhood arguments. "If it isn't the royal couple, gracing us with your presence." I saw Preston's hand move slightly closer to mine on the table. He looked up at her, his expression perfectly calm. "Hello, Brenda. How are you?" "Oh, I'm just great," she said, taking a long swallow of her margarita. Business is booming. You know, some of us still do honest work for a living. The jab was clearly aimed at me, though her eyes remained locked on my husband. My cousin Elena shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I should, go check on the kids, she mumbled, making a hasty retreat and leaving the three of us in a triangle of simmering hostility. Brenda, I said, keeping my voice low. It's Mom's party. Can we please not do this today? Do what? She asked, her voice full of mock innocence. I'm just catching up with my brother-in-law. Asking about his very important job where he gets to decide other people's fates from his fancy throne. Preston remained perfectly still, a master of projecting calm authority. It was a skill honed by years of presiding over contentious hearings. I understand you and Gary are doing well with the business, he said, his tone polite and even. Your parents must be very proud. It was exactly the right thing to say, acknowledging her without taking the bait. But Brenda wasn't interested in de-escalation. She was here for a fight. Yeah, well, some of us stayed loyal to the family instead of running off to marry money and live in fancy neighborhoods, she spat. Brenda, stop, my voice came out sharper than I intended, drawing glances from nearby tables. You're being ridiculous. Am I? Her eyes finally shifted to me, and I saw something dark and ugly in them. It was the same look she used to get right before a childhood tantrum, a volatile mixture of hurt and rage. You haven't called Mom in 3 weeks. You missed Dad's doctor's appointment. But you show up here in your designer dress, acting like you still belong. I've been dealing with pregnancy complications, I said, my hand instinctively moving to my belly. The doctor put me on modified bed rest after that bleeding scare. Always an excuse with you, isn't it? Preston's voice cut through the tension like a blade. That's enough. Brenda turned her full attention back to him, a sneer twisting her lips. Oh, the judge speaks. What are you going to do? Hold me in contempt? I'm going to ask you to step away from my wife. Your wife? Brenda let out a harsh, ugly laugh. She was my sister long before she was your wife. My sister who used to help Dad with estimates, who knew every worker by name. Now look at her, sitting there like some delicate little flower who can't handle a conversation. The mariachi band had finished their set, and in the sudden quiet, our voices carried. I could see my mom approaching from across the yard, her face creased with concern. Brenda, please, I said, standing up slowly. Let's just go somewhere private and talk about this. Oh, now you want to talk? After months of treating us like we're beneath you? I never treated you like that. The hell you didn't. The profanity was loud enough that several conversations stopped completely. You know what your problem is, Audrey? You think marrying a judge makes you better than us. You think his precious title elevates you above your raising? Preston stood up as well, his movement deliberate and controlled. Brenda, you're upset. But you are crossing a line. What line? She stepped closer, and I could smell the tequila on her breath. The line where I'm not allowed to call out my own sister for being a fake? My own anger finally surfaced. You want to know what's fake? This whole victim act. You're just jealous because Preston and I are happy. You can't stand that I found someone who treats me with respect. Respect? Her face flushed red. Is that what you call it when your husband sits there judging us with his fancy education? He looks at Dad's hands, at the way we talk, like this whole party is some quaint little ethnic experience for him. You're projecting your own insecurities, Brenda, Preston said, his voice steady but with an edge of steel. I have nothing but respect for your family. Insecurities? She laughed bitterly. That's rich, coming from a man who thinks a black robe makes him God. That's enough. I stepped between them, my heart racing. You're drunk and you're embarrassing Mom on her birthday. Don't you dare lecture me about embarrassing the family, she shrieked. You're the one who ran off and married the first man with a big salary who paid any attention to you. The words hit me like a physical blow. After 8 years, to have her reduce our love to a transaction. I felt tears threatening, and I hated myself for showing her that weakness. Take that back, I whispered. Why? Because it's true? She leaned in, her voice a venomous hiss. You know what I think? I think you got pregnant on purpose. To trap the judge with a baby so he can't leave when he gets tired of playing house with his little charity project. The air was sucked out of the party. Everyone was staring. My mom had gone pale. My dad was pushing his way through the crowd, his face dark with fury. Brenda Rodriguez, you apologize to your sister right now, my mom commanded, but her voice shook. Brenda ignored her, her eyes locked on me. That's it, isn't it? You figured out how to lock him down permanently. Get yourself knocked up so he has to keep pretending you belong in his world. And something inside me just snapped. All the years of making excuses for her, of biting my tongue, it all came rushing out in a wave of pure rage. You're pathetic, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent yard. Absolutely pathetic. You can't stand that I'm happy because you're miserable. Her face went from red to white. You little. Brenda. My dad's roar cut through the air as he finally reached us, but it was too late. It was already too late. In the split second that followed my words, time seemed to warp. I saw Brenda lunge forward. For a heartbeat, I thought she was just going to shove me, to grab my arm. I was wrong. Instead, her leg came up, fast and hard. Her foot, clad in a pointed toe heel, connected squarely with my rounded belly. The world exploded in a starburst of white-hot pain. The breath was knocked completely out of me. I doubled over, a strangled gasp tearing from my throat, but no air would come in. The pain was immense, a deep, sickening agony that radiated through my entire abdomen. But worse than the pain, so much worse, was the silence. The terrifying, absolute stillness inside my womb. My baby girl, who had been so active all morning, went completely still. I vaguely heard Preston shout my sister's name, a sound of pure, unrestrained fury. I heard my mother scream, a sharp, piercing cry of horror. I heard the sickening thud of bodies colliding as my dad, with a lifetime of pent-up frustration, tackled his own daughter to the ground. But all of it seemed far away, muffled, as if happening underwater. The only thing that was real was the terrifying silence where my daughter's kicks should have been. I sank to my knees on the grass, my hands pressed protectively over my stomach, my mind chanting a desperate prayer. Please, baby girl. Please kick me. Please just let me know you're okay. Please, please, please. Preston was beside me in an instant, his hands gentle on my shoulders, his face a mask of white-knuckled terror. Audrey, talk to me. Where does it hurt? The baby, I gasped, finally managing to suck in a ragged breath. She's not moving, Preston. She's not moving. I saw the color drain from his face, but his voice, when he spoke, was a fortress of calm. It was the voice of the judge, the man who brought order to chaos. We're going to the hospital. Right now. Around us, the party had devolved into pandemonium. My dad was pinning a struggling, screaming Brenda to the lawn. My mom was sobbing, repeating I'm so sorry, over and over again. Gary, Brenda's husband, just stood frozen near the bar, his hand covering his mouth in horror, a statue of uselessness. Preston helped me to my feet, his arms supporting most of my weight. Tom, he called out to our neighbor, who had been watching the whole scene unfold, his eyes wide as dinner plates. Can you pull your car around? We need to get to Presbyterian Hospital immediately. As Tom ran for his keys, I looked back at my sister. My dad had hauled her upright, but her face showed no remorse. No shock. No regret. If anything, she looked satisfied. A chilling, triumphant smirk played on her lips, like she'd finally gotten the reaction she'd been craving. This is what you get, she spat, struggling against Dad's grip. This is what happens when you think you're better than your family. And that's when it happened. Preston stopped walking. He turned slowly, deliberately, to face my sister. In that moment, the gentle, kind man I loved vanished completely. In his place stood federal Judge Preston Hayes, and he carried with him the full, crushing weight of the United States government. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet. It was perfectly calm. And it was the most terrifying sound I had ever heard. "Brenda Rodriguez," he said, and the absolute authority in his tone silenced the entire yard. Even the children stopped playing. "You just committed felony assault in front of more than 50 witnesses." He took a step closer. "You assaulted a pregnant woman. My pregnant wife." For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Brenda's features. The smug satisfaction began to falter. Preston continued, each word a perfectly chosen, perfectly sharpened weapon. "When we get back from the hospital, when I know for certain that my wife and my daughter are safe, I am going to destroy you." He let that hang in the air for a moment. "I'm not going to do it as Audrey's husband. I am going to do it as a federal judge who just watched you commit a violent, premeditated crime. The FBI will investigate. The U.S. attorney will prosecute. And I will use every single legal resource at my disposal to ensure you face the maximum penalty under federal law." Tom's car pulled up to the edge of the yard. Preston turned his back on my sister and guided me toward it without another word. As we walked away, I heard Brenda start to shout something, but my dad's voice cut her off with a finality that was heartbreaking. "You're done," Dad told his daughter, his voice cracking with grief and rage. "You're done with this family." The car ride to the hospital was a blur of silent terror. Preston held my hand, his grip a lifeline in a swirling ocean of fear. I just kept my other hand pressed to my belly, waiting, begging for a sign, a flutter, anything. But there was only silence. That awful, ominous silence. "She's going to be okay," Preston murmured, though I could hear the raw fear under his forced reassurance. "What if she's not?" I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "What if Brenda, what if?" "Don't," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "Don't think like that. We're going to get you checked out, and then we're going to handle this." I looked at his profile as he stared out the window, his jaw set like granite. My sister had no idea what she had done. She thought she'd kicked me. What she'd really done was declare war on one of the most powerful institutions in the country. And they were going to crush her. The emergency room at Presbyterian Hospital was a whirlwind of controlled urgency. They rushed me into an examination room, and soon Dr. Chang, my OBGYN, was there. She was a no-nonsense